Ethan Miller had learned how to live quietly. At 34, he had a steady job in downtown Chicago, a neat apartment, and a routine that rarely changed. Mornings were coffee and traffic. From the outside, his life looked balanced. Inside, it felt unfinished. It was the feeling of standing still while time kept moving. Longer. That night, it felt stronger, like a question demanding an answer. Claire and Jonah, they were a couple who believed in talking openly about emotions, boundaries, and fear. He told himself that chapter was. His fingers hovered over the screen. He placed the phone face down on the table as if distance could soften the result. Minutes passed, then his phone vibrated. His heart beat faster, not from excitement, but from awareness. 2 weeks later, they arrived. Claire stepped into the apartment first. Her eyes still held warmth, but now there was caution too. They greeted Ethan with quiet smiles, the kind that carried history. The apartment felt smaller with them inside, not crowded, just awake. About jobs, cities, and time. The easy things, but under every word lived something deeper, something careful. Claire walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. "Do you still choose places with a view?" she said. Ethan smiled. "Some habits stay." Jonah watched Ethan closely. "You didn't invite us here just to talk about habits." The words were not sharp, just honest. Ethan nodded. "No, I didn't." Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. "I feel stuck," Ethan said. "Not unhappy, just distant from myself. And you thought seeing us would help?" "I thought it might remind." They sat together on the couch, close but not touching. That night, they shared dinner. Laughter came easily, surprising them. All stories flowed faster than expected. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at the floor, then at them, to see if I still have them. Jonah leaned back, thoughtful. Claire studied Ethan's face. "And what are you afraid of?" Every sound. The cold air cleared their minds, but not their questions. Ethan felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. Not because of attraction alone, but because he was finally present. As they walked, Jonah spoke. "We didn't come here expecting answers." Claire nodded. "But we need clarity." Ethan stopped walking. "I won't pretend this is simple. I invited you here knowing it could open old feelings." "I won't lie about that." Claire looked away toward the water. "Feelings don't ask permission. That's what scares me," Ethan said. "And what draws me in," they continued, walking, each lost in thought. That afternoon, they sat at a small cafe. The world around them moved fast, unaware of the quiet tension at their table. Ethan realized that this wasn't about romance alone. It was about choice, about honesty. He saw how carefully Claire held Jonah's hand, how Jonah watched Claire. Before speaking, their connection was real, grounded. Ethan respected it more than ever. And yet, he felt himself standing at the edge of something he couldn't fully name. That evening, back at the apartment, the mood shifted. Words slowed. Emotions rose. Claire spoke softly. "We need to be clear about why we're here." Ethan. "Met our eyes because I asked you to be?" "And because you chose to come," Jonah added. "Choice matters." "I don't want to break anything. I want to understand myself without hurting others." Claire took a deep breath. "Then we take this one step at a time." The agreement felt fragile but sincere. As night settled in, Ethan stood alone by the window again, listening to the city. He realized something important. Inviting them in had already changed him. Whether this led to clarity or heartbreak, there was no turning back. Behind him, Claire and Jonah talked quietly, their voices low but steady. They were here, fully aware of the risk. Ethan closed his eyes. Testing his limits had begun the moment he opened the door, and he knew deep down that whatever came next would demand more honesty than he had ever given before. Ethan woke before the others, his mind already moving faster than the city outside. He stood in the kitchen, staring at a half-filled cup of coffee, thinking. about how quickly everything had changed. Bringing Claire and Jonah into his space had done more than wake old memories. She looked calm, but her eyes carried thought. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Neither did you," Ethan replied. They shared a small smile, not playful, but the three of them sat at the table, the air heavy with words they were choosing carefully. They decided not to avoid things. The city felt louder than before, full of life and contrast. Ethan felt strangely awake, like he had been living underwater and had finally come. Not dramatic ones, but real ones. Fear of confusion, fear of regret. Jonah listened, nodding, adding his thoughts when needed. He spoke about trust, about how fragile it could be if handled. Without care, Ethan listened more than he talked. It was about responsibility. They stopped at a park and sat on a bench. Ethan looked at them both. "I thought inviting you here would give me answers," he said. "Instead, it gave me questions." Claire crossed her arms thinking, "Questions mean you're paying attention." Jonah added, "Answers come later." They cooked together, shared stories, and laughed at small things. The laughter felt real, not forced. Yet under it all was tension, like a quiet warning. That evening, rain began to fall. The city slowed, lights reflecting on wet streets. Inside, the apartment felt smaller again, but warmer. They talked about the past, but didn't live in it. They talked about the future, but didn't promise anything. At one point, Ethan felt the weight of what he was doing. He realized he had invited two people into uncertainty because he was afraid of facing his own emptiness alone. That truth hurt. Later, when Claire stepped onto the balcony to watch the rain, Ethan followed. The air was cool. She didn't look at him at first. "You're not broken," she said suddenly. "You're just restless." Ethan swallowed. Restlessness can hurt people. "Only if you let it lead without thought," she replied. Inside. Jonah watched them through the glass, not with jealousy, but with concern. He trusted Claire, but he also trusted honesty. When they came back inside, he spoke. "We need to slow this down," Jonah said. "Not stop, just slow." Ethan nodded. Immediately. "You're right." That night, the mood shifted from curiosity to reflection. Silence filled the rooms, but it wasn't empty. It was thoughtful. Each of them faced private thoughts, measuring desire against respect. The next day, they walked by the lake again. The water was calm, wide, and honest. Ethan felt something settle inside him. He'd been testing limits without asking what those limits were protecting. He stopped walking and turned to them. "I invited you here to feel something," he said. "But I don't want that feeling to cost anyone their peace." Claire looked at Jonah. Jonah looked back. Years of understanding passed between them in seconds. "We came here because we trust you," Claire said. "And because we trust ourselves," Jonah added. "But trust needs care." Ethan took a deep breath. "Then here's my truth. I don't need to cross a line to know it exists. I just needed to see it clearly." The words surprised even him. Saying them felt like release. They sat on a low wall near the water. The wind was cool but steady. For the first time, Ethan felt calm. Not because things were solved, but because he had stopped pushing. That afternoon, they packed their bags. There was no anger, no drama. Just understanding mixed with sadness. Claire hugged Ethan long and warm. Jonah shook his hand, firm and respectful. "This wasn't a mistake," Claire said. "It was a lesson." Ethan nodded. "One I needed." As they walked away, Ethan felt the familiar fear of being alone. But this time, it didn't swallow him. It stood beside him, quiet and manageable. Back in the apartment, the silence returned. But it felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was open. Ethan sat by the window again, watching the city breathe. He realized that testing limits wasn't about how far he could go. It was about knowing when to stop. He didn't feel finished, but he felt honest. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough.